Okay, last leg then of the basics of negligence. You've established a duty of care was owed, you've established the care a reasonable person would take was not taken, so that duty has been breached. The last thing you have to establish is, did that breach cause the damage? So we call that the element of causation. And if you can have this third set of the hat trick, you'll have a successful claim. So let's think about, did the breach cause the damage? Okay, in lecture 1, in Negligence 1, I talked about whether you might be a producer of beer and you deliver that beer to some part of the country where it is consumed. Suppose in your production line you failed to look at the production line and some slug got into the bottle. The bottle, as you can see, is stone, so you can't see through the glass, and that horrible snail made the person who drank the beer ill. Was your breach on the production line the cause of their illness? So you owe a duty of care, we said, because it's foreseeable when you make something that the person who eventually drinks it might be affected by your actions. And let's say the reasonable person would have prevented that snail getting into the beer bottle on the production line. Was that failure to prevent the snail getting into the bottle, was that the cause of the damage? Well, yes it was, and I hope you've seen, no matter how many miles that beer travelled, no matter how long the time between the brewing and the drinking happened, it was the cause of the illness. But of course things are sometimes slightly more complicated. Suppose in your bottle was actual poison, made for no doubt a legitimate purpose, but someone maliciously gave that poison to someone to drink, and that made them very, very ill. They were rushed to hospital, where the doctor was having a bad day and said, you know what, that looks like tonsillitis to me, take a paracetamol and go home. Sadly, he fails in his duty, so he owed a high standard of care and he didn't meet it. We've already talked about doctors. And then the patient dies. The man who's drunk the poison dies. Is it the doctor's failure that causes that death? Okay, so the doctor owed a duty, he has breached the duty. Was it his failure that caused the death? Because without all three elements, even though he might have behaved badly, you might think, that might not be a successful negligence claim. So you have to eliminate that failure for a minute and ask yourself, but for his failure to treat him, would that man have died anyway? And in that particular set of facts, and you'll not be surprised to hear it is based on a particular case, the court looked at everything and said even if he'd behaved really immaculately to the absolute standard you would expect of a reasonably skilled doctor, and he had admitted him straight away, he'd tried to get the antidote to the poison, that man would still have died. So that was the conclusion they reached, but for his failure the man would have died anyway. So therefore the doctor's failure did not cause the damage, it was the original administration of the poison. So that particular claim would have failed, because on the third leg it fell apart. Okay, there are more complications to this, what we call the chain of causation. So I've got a little image there just suggesting a chain being snapped. And if you are someone who is trying to defend a claim of negligence, if you can show that something's happened to break the chain of causation, so that even if you have owed a duty and breached a duty, it wasn't what caused the damage, then you escape liability for negligence. So there are complications, and they're always where the interest lies. Suppose a person has died and you've behaved badly. There are multiple factors that actually could have affected that outcome. How they'd eaten, what the doctor said and did, yes, the nature of the disease itself. So where there are multiple things contributing to an outcome, it's quite difficult to establish causation in negligence. And so medical cases are complicated like that, because it's never simple, there's never just one thing. And if there are too many causes, it's very difficult to ascribe particular failure of duty to be the sole cause of the damage caused. So that can complicate matters when it comes to the chain of causation. Another thing that can complicate it, suppose you've brewed your beer and it was fine, and actually some malicious saboteur en route from the factory adds the snail to the beer. Well, then their actions have intervened to break the the chain of causation, and it wasn't your failure, it was in fact their intervention, the intervention of that third party, that caused the damage. That breaks the chain of causation between you owing your duty, taking your care, and causing that damage. Also, the law says not all kinds of damage are foreseeable, so we come to that key idea of foreseeability again. Suppose you are transporting millions of gallons of crude oil. We all know from the news stories, if these ships are wrecked or holed in some way, releasing all that crude oil into the sea can cause terrible pollution, and it can damage wildlife and the shoreline and so on, and cost millions of pounds to clear up. But what is very unlikely to happen, because it's difficult, is that when that crude oil leaks, it will burst into flames. It's actually quite difficult to ignite crude oil. Petrol, obviously very flammable, but crude oil, very difficult to ignite. So when a particular tanker was damaged in a harbour and the crude oil spilled and it polluted the whole area, well, that was definitely a foreseeable damage. So they owe a duty if you're carrying crude oil around. If you fail to take proper care of the ship, so it leaks oil into this thing, you are responsible for the pollution damage. But what the law says is unforeseeable kind of damage, like fire damage. So in this case, the crude oil not only polluted the harbour, it caused millions of pounds worth of fire damage to buildings around the harbour. That was not foreseeable, and that also broke the chain of causation. So as you can see, three elements: multiple causes, third-party intervention, unforeseeable type of damage. Each one of those will also break the chain of causation. Okay, so let's just see how we go on applying those to a couple of hypothetical set of facts. Suppose you dug a hole in the road. Okay, if you dig a hole in the road, it's clear that you owe a duty of care to the people in the road, and you put a tent over it to protect it, and you have paraffin lamps so people can see it's coming. So you've taken some reasonable care to avoid people falling into the hole. But unexpectedly, someone who's 14 pinches one of the paraffin lamps and drops it into the hole. Now, it's perfectly foreseeable that paraffin with a live flame will burn someone. What hadn't been anticipated was a massive explosion causing even wider damage. But the law said actually that was so close to burn damage that it's not like the crude oil one where you've got pollution or fire. You've got fire or an explosion, and actually they're so similar that that's recoverable damage. So again, when you're looking at a scenario like this, the important thing is not necessarily the answer, it's the way you get your way to the answer. It's a bit like a maths problem: show you working out and we can give you marks for the working out. So establish the duty, establish the breach of duty, then think about causation. And again, here the type of damage was not enough in the first instance to break the chain of causation. So what about where you leave a skip outside your property and you require night lights? The law requires that you illuminate it so people don't crash into it. However, suppose somebody steals those lights. So someone cycling back from the pub crashes into the skip and breaks their leg. Are you responsible for their injury? Okay, you have a duty when you put a skip in the road. You've taken reasonable precautions. Someone has intervened. So in this case, you talk about the intervention of a third party breaking the chain of causation. So again, the outcome is not the important thing, it's showing that you've understood the issues. Thank you very much. I hope we've covered the basics of negligence now. Okay, so just to recap again, you've got to show that you understand these basic concepts covered in the 3 lectures, and you need to try and separate out the different bits of it, so the duty, the breach and the causation, and the various key vocabulary around that. If you want to do, you're aiming for the best marks possible, also add into it, and you can check this by doing your reading from the SEMA book, by talking to Monica, Michelle or I. You can know the case names, you can know some more of the complications, but what you need to be able to do to get by is understand the concepts as I've discussed them and be able to apply them to simple scenarios. And as I said at the beginning of this show, I think one of the key things that's hard is don't just instantly respond to everything. Break it down into the duty, into the breach, into the causation, into the different elements of each. And good luck. Hope you enjoy. Next time, negligent misstatement.